Okay, so now the battleground. How does neoliberalism versus radical feminism come into mainstream feminism? And let's look at two things, porn and so-called sex work. So in the radical feminist view, and these are some of the books, let's look what pornography is. As Andrea Dworkin so elegantly put it, think about pornography as a new institution of social control, a democratic use of terrorism against all women, a way of saying to every woman, look down, bitch, because when you look up, you're going to see your legs spread. That's what pornography was understood, collective terrorism against women as a class. Now, today, porn is actually to be celebrated. This is a book that came out recently, and this is the review. The feminist porn book identifies the importance of pornography as a form of expression and labor in which women and other minorities produce power and pleasure. Now, what's missing from this analysis is the fact that these women are the poorest, most exploited, women often with histories of sexual abuse and are spat out by the porn industry within 3 months, often to get onto a bus to the brothels of Nevada with the clothes on their back if they're lucky. But no, this is actually an expression of labor in which women and other minorities produce power and pleasure. Yeah, they produce lots of power and pleasure, but not for women, for men. So suddenly we have a feminism that's all about men, and suddenly women have disappeared. Now, when I wrote my book, Pornland, the worst review it got was in Ms. Magazine. So what was really interesting, it was reviewed by a third-wave feminist called Shira Tarrant. And she went to town on me, let me tell you. But the most interesting thing is in Pornland, I look at pornography from a Marxist political economy perspective. I look at it as an industry, I look at it in terms of production, consumption, all the things that we need to look at. So what did she do? She basically, when I talked specifically about how women in porn are within a system not of their own making, are there because of poverty, she then interviews one porn performer who's on the job. So this is like me asking a Walmart associate, do you like your job? As his manager's got his hand around him. He said, yes, of course, I love my job at Walmart. I'm here because I just like to hang out, you know, nothing to do with money, right? So they ask, and then the porn performer, who has got no choice, said, there is no doubt it's a very physical job. However, it is also a very individual profession. A performer always has the choice of not doing something they're not comfortable with. Complete lie. You actually have no choice. You get thrown out of the industry. You get forced into it. You get raped into it. We know when we speak to women who've been in porn that this is a complete lie. But the most interesting thing is I write a book about pornography as a system of inequality, as embedded in a system of inequality, and what do I get to fight back? One person's voice that trumps a whole entire political analysis. That's what it means when we talk about individualism. Right? You don't have structures anymore. Every individual's view is equal to the next. Well, actually, it's not true. It doesn't work like that because we all live in a society not of our own making. So it's all about individual choice of individual performer. But what's missing when you look at pornography is a structural understanding of porn as an industry woven into global capitalism. And the pornographers get that because when you interview pornographers like Andrew Edmond, he's not talking about fun and fantasy. He says, a lot of people get distracted from the business model by the sex. Porn is just as sophisticated and multi-layered as any other marketplace. We operate just like any other Fortune 500 company. The pornographers know that. It's just a bunch of academics who seem to be clueless about what's really going on in pornography. Now let's talk about sex work versus prostituted women. Sex work focuses on the women, decontextualized from the economic, political and legal context of the buying of sexual exploitation. You do not buy sex. As Rachel Moran says in her book, you buy access to sexual exploitation. It's a very different thing. Prostituted women, when you say prostituted women are not sex work, then suddenly you have to talk about an economic system that commodifies humans. You have to bring in patriarchy that makes women and children the most obvious group to commodify and monetize. You have to bring in racism that makes women of color the obvious, most likely group of women to commodify. And then, of course, we have to have who we never talk about, which is the pimp and the John. Men, when we talk about sex work, it looks like cars are buying women. Where do you see a man? It's just a bunch of cars buying women. Well, let's put the men back. These were a bunch of Johns who recently got arrested, so you can just look at their faces. Let's talk about a John, right? Let's talk about a trafficker who never got really arrested. Well, he got arrested, but he got away with it. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who ran the IMF, right? Do you know why women are fucked? Because men like him control the world, okay? He's a trafficker, he's a rapist, he's a John, all of those things. And you know what? This is the woman that he raped, amongst others. And by the way, right, what happened is, of course, it all went away. Cyrus Vance let it all go away because he was married to the rich, because Dominique Strauss-Kahn was married to one of the richest women in France. And so, of course, they paid off the first, basically, Miss Diafo, because she was poor, she was first generation, she was a maid in the Sofitel Hotel, right, single mother. I'm sure she was absolutely paid off. But where were the feminists outside saying, don't let Dominique Strauss-Kahn get away with it? You know where the feminists were that summer? Organising slut marches. Right? So what would have happened to her if she would have gone on a slut march? Well, this was the New York Post. Of course she's going to be a hooker. She's black, for God's sake. Isn't that enough evidence? What more do you need? The fact that her blood and his semen were up the bathroom walls of the Sofitel Hotel didn't seem to make any difference. She was just a hooker. So the question is, okay, what is feminism? So let's go back to the political theory and practice to free all women, women of colour, working class women, poor women, physically challenged women, lesbians, older women, as well also as white, economically privileged heterosexual women. Anything less than that is not feminism. That's liberation. That's not empowerment. So what do we do? How do we do this? Well, I like to take Gramsci's argument, pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. Always optimism of the will. We can change this, because if you don't believe that, then you do the work of the devil, let me tell you. If you think we've lost all of this, you do the work of the enemy. So you have to have faith, but never, ever have a starry-eyed view that it's just going to happen tomorrow. But the optimism of the will is the belief that it can happen. And you know why it can happen? Because it happens because of women power. We have been the leaders of every single major movement that made this world livable. And then, of course, when it becomes a movement, women end up doing all the coffee and everything else, and the men take over. So let's just be very clear about this. Women have moved this world. We have made it livable. We have made it a world worth living in, and we have that power to change it. Thank you.